welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today we'll be talking to activist, podcast host, professional speaker, author, and former Texas State Senator candidate, Aron Ra. We'll be talking about atheism, the education system, why he dropped out of the election, and, of course, Donald Trump. Let's get started.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Thomas Bear, a small business owner and activist, happy to talk to you, buddy.
Thank you for having me on.
You design t-shirts, right, with the atheist messages on them?
Yes, I do. I got on Facebook back in 2016, and shortly after that, I started making various memes of different designs, mostly atheist. After a while, I had a few friends of mine tell me that some of my designs would make good t-shirts. You know, I've been doing that since the January of last year, I think, is when I started doing the t-shirts.
Cool. What kind of themes do you get into?
Well, for one, the atheist designs. That's my focus.
And some political stuff, too, right?
Yeah, I've got a few political ones. Like one of my designs, political one, says, I was just a voter, now I'm an activist.
Yeah, isn't that weird how it seems like ever since November of 2016, everybody seems to care a lot more. Or whatever side of the political climate these people are on, like everybody seems more engaged. And in some ways it's really encouraging because, you know, it seems like everybody cares now. But on the other side, it seems really divisive.
Yeah.
It's a wild time to be alive.
Yes, that is very true.
How can people find these shirts and how can they get a hold of all your designs and apparel?
My main Facebook page I've got as facebook.com/OTCA atheist. It's capital O, capital T, capital C, capital A, and then lowercase THEIST. So OTC atheist.
Cool. Well, Thomas, I love your stuff, man. I hope you keep it up. We all appreciate your activism, sir.
Thank you very much.
This is Aron Ra, and you have the right to reason.
Build that wall! This is going to be a tough one to hear, and people aren't going to like it. But it's very important to understand that in fascism, the idea is that we're not individual human beings who have thoughts and reflect before we speak. The idea is that we are tribes. Build a wall! Build a wall! And that politics begins from deciding who the enemy is. So rather than being an individual, rather than thinking, what we're supposed to do is mark ourselves up into a tribe and define who the enemy is. And you define the enemy by way of a ritual. So a chant is a form of a ritual.
You gotta speak to Jeff Sessions about that.
It's no accident that those chants go directly to very elementary human feelings.
Turn off the lights! Turn off the lights!
The feeling that you need boundaries, the feeling of anxiety, the notion that others are different and therefore threatening.
I don't know if you are aware, sir, but you were my first guest, the first guest on the Right to Reason podcast. I was so damn nervous talking to you, man, because I've followed your career from, day one of my deconversion, and I've loved your stuff.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Before we get started, could you let everybody know where they can find your channel, where they can find out more about your activism, how they can support you and learn more?
Okay, well, the most important thing first, I guess, would be my Patreon page, because for the last 4 years, I've been a full-time activist. And everything I do is supported on patreon.com/ARONRA. And I really do need all the support I can get. So, we're about to do another, Patreon video, explain, the video that tells everybody what it is that we do. But, because I just realized yesterday that we're still using one from like 2 years back that really needs to be updated. But, what we do is we very often we travel quite a lot. We do to rallies and conferences and conventions. We've also done some direct political things like testifying before the House or for the state. And, of course, testifying repeatedly for the Texas State Board of Education. And we show up for a number of political events and marches and that sort of thing and do a lot of presentations. The goal, of course, is to try to affect change. And if we can't do that legislatively directly, then we can do that through public awareness campaigns. And so this is how we managed to... When I started, to give you an example, when I started this 20 years ago, there was something like 3% of Americans that would identify as atheists or even non-believers. And I remember at one point where that had gotten up to 8%, and it was still people very hesitant to admit that they didn't believe. They always wanted to label themselves as whatever religion they were born into, even if they also admitted that they didn't believe a word of it. Everybody thought that they had to have a religion. Whether you believed in it or not, didn't matter. You just had to claim a religion. So now we've gotten to a point where there's still a very few people comparatively who actually understand what atheist means. Very often they think that means that, there are people who still think that atheist means devil worshiper, or that an atheist is someone who knows there is no God. Well, that can be true. It doesn't necessarily have to be. An atheist literally is anyone who is not convinced that an actual deity really exists. And what I mean by actual deity is you have to, a lot of people will tell you, well, I believe there's something. Well, we all believe there's something. Is it a God? And then when we get into what a God is, there's a whole bunch of different definitions. So, I have to go with the definition that covers all of them from the Yahweh of the Bible to Thor and Dionysus and all of those. The best way to summarize it would be a magical, anthropomorphic, immortal. And people don't understand what magical means. Well, supernatural. If it has miraculous powers, that's what magic means, literally. So if you're talking about something that has any human attributes and can't be killed at least by normal means, because you can kill immortals. We've seen in the Highlander, you can kill them with certain, chop the sword through the head. Maybe you'll get that. There are specific means for killing immortals that can be done, but generally what ends up happening with a god is that when you kill the body, the god continues on. It either adopts some other form, or it in any case it survives the death of the physical body and may reincarnate and become the new version of itself, like Dionysus II did, which is an actual character from history. It's where they killed Dionysus and then he came back as Dionysus II. Seriously, the sequel of himself.
Like the second coming.
There's a lot of people who don't understand the atheist thing. They don't want to say they lack belief in a God. That's literally what it is. There's a lot of people there's a few people anyway that want to say that not being convinced of the story that the theists are telling is enough to call themselves atheists. Instead, they want to say that atheism is a positive belief in no God, which doesn't make any sense. If you tell me that you are Superman or that you're a spy for the government and all of this hush hush secret that I have to keep in confidence, I'm not going to believe you. And me not believing you is not necessarily a positive belief. Does that make sense? You could tell me that you have $1 million in a Swiss bank account, and I will entertain the possibility that maybe you do, but I'm not convinced that you do. And you don't have a positive belief that you don't until I have a positive belief that you do. There are negative beliefs. There's where I don't believe you. It's not that I believe you're wrong. It's that I don't believe you're right. And there's too few people can make that distinction. So the biggest problem with being an atheist is the problem that people don't identify as an atheist because they don't know what an atheist means. I myself was an atheist for 15 years before I learned what the word atheist meant. And then there's some people who call themselves agnostic for a couple of reasons. They say that agnostic means that you don't know, which technically means that you don't know that you're an atheist. I've had people say that just because I don't believe in gods doesn't make me an atheist, but that's exactly what makes you an atheist. There's a lot of people who want to be on the fence, who call themselves centrists or call themselves agnostics because they don't want to be on the side of the theists and they don't want to be associated with atheists either, so they say they're agnostic, so they're in the middle so that they don't have to make a commitment either way. But regarding the atheist position, there is not there's no middle ground here. There's no way to be between the atheists and the theists. You are either convinced that an actual deity really exists, which makes you theist, or you're not convinced, which makes you atheist. And you're atheist right up until the point that you're convinced. There's no middle ground. So it's a very simple question. Now, most of America has not figured out the answer to that question, so we have to lump the agnostics in with the atheists because they don't understand what agnostic or atheist mean. But that still means that we account for literally a quarter of the United States population currently. That means that there are more non-believers. And we know this because of the way that the polls ask the questions. You know, people will say that they're not religious and that they don't believe and that religion is not important to them. So that they're laying out how they are atheists just without using the atheist label. If I could, I would do a poll saying, you know, are you convinced an actual deity really exists? And then, okay, that puts you in the atheist box. Although the people taking the poll would never realize that puts them in the atheist box. But there's a series of questions that polls have done that have these questions like this, where the people express that they don't believe, and maybe they don't even have to realize what that means. But it still means that there are 1/4 of the United States is atheist, and there are more of us than there are Jews, of course, and there are more of us than there are even Catholics.
Wow.
And a lot of people would be very surprised to know that we outnumber Catholics. Now, all the religions are in a steady state of decline. I mean, all of them. Supposedly, Islam is the fastest growing religion, and in a sense it is, but you have to take into account that atheism, secularism, the non-belief, the irreligious nuns, the demographic that does not buy the religious story, which is what atheism means, is a faster growing demographic even than Islam. And within Islam, you have a whole lot of people that readily identify as Muslim and then will tell you they don't believe at all. Just like you have buckets of Christians who go to church and admit, you know, to your friends that they don't believe a word of it. They just go because they're supposed to or because they always have, but they don't buy. Then they never. A lot of these people never realize that you know what, you're atheist, because they have no idea what that word means.
Because it's like it's a cultural thing for them, I think, because they say, I identify this way culturally, but they're not actually talking about the real issue epistemologically.
Yeah, one way to look at it is, you know, I'm a Libra. I understand that I'm a Libra because I was born in middle of October, and so that makes me Libra. So I'm not going to deny that the definition applies to me that I'm a Libra. Of course, that doesn't mean anything to me because I know there's no truth or value in astrology. You know, a lot of other people may not realize that, but whether they do or not doesn't matter. We all accept that, okay, well, you're born in the middle of October, that makes you a Libra. Likewise, you were born in the United States, you're born in Texas, that's a Christian-dominated culture, that means you're Christian. If you don't want to choose a different label, here's the T-shirt that most Texans wear by default, so you wear that T-shirt that says Christian.
Right.
And that's all it means to some people. It's like choosing a football team. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people that do the exact same thing. They choose the religion exactly the same way that they choose their football team, which high school they went to, which college they went to, what state they live on, and so on. A religion has no more meaning to the majority of people than that.
So I wanted to pick your brain about this very topic, but in relation to the Texas School Board. As I understand it, a lot of what happens with Texas school books occurs all over the country. Just simply, help me out with that. It's
well,
this
has changed. Yeah, I know what you're referring to. Unfortunately, it has changed.
Well, that's good.
It was 10 years ago that the way that the printing presses worked, to be cost effective, you would have two major states that ended up buying. When they set up their textbooks, the printers would accommodate California and Texas. Subsequent states would use whatever California or Texas decreed. So whenever the templates were set up for those two states, then those templates would go out to every other state. So Texas being distinctly different from California, they would have this conservative skew. And being the big school book buyer that we are, very often dominated even California, so that whatever Texas demanded for our textbooks ended up being the textbooks for the rest of the country. So when the Texas State Board of Education puts in changes to culturally advantage white people, for example, I mean, in our social studies textbooks, they have famously removed most of the non-white heroes. They tried to remove Thurgood Marshall, for example, because they didn't want any black people in positions of authority that would be seen as a role model. They wanted everything to reflect white Christian heritage, white Protestant Christian heritage. So even Catholics were minimized. References to Catholicism were minimized. As of course, there was no mention of non-believers. Susan B. Anthony is in our social studies textbooks, but there's no mention of the fact that she was an atheist. Of course, this is how they tone things down. And in a lot of places, I remember one there was a reference to hip hop music in one of our social studies textbooks, and the board demanded that be changed to country western.
They can't even have hip hop.
Right. You can't make reference to there were textbooks that removed all references to Native Americans that already existed, like in studies of Texas history, for example. They would just remove the fact that they were already people here, and that there are still, those people are still here. They were just removed because they weren't important. They wanted, and they talked about this in the American exceptionalism, where they want to present the United States as if it was God ordained to be better than every other country. And so they deliberately omit anything from our history that would be embarrassing, that we're no longer proud of, right? So one of the things that they did to create this myth was to remove any reference to slavery, up to and including where slaves were referred to in one of our social studies textbooks as workers.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you can't have any negative press. So what that means is it's entirely dishonest propaganda. It is terribly important, I think, that people understand the dark side of the United States. And it didn't make me any less patriotic to understand the things that America historically has done. If anything, the only thing, because you can't understand the importance of defending the Constitution, for example. A lot of people think the Constitution prohibits this so that it'll never happen, but unconstitutional laws are passed all the time. And we've seen historically there's been a lot of laws that were passed by entire state legislators, hundreds of people working in a Senate, that clearly and distinctly violate the Constitution, and they would remain for decades until somebody finally brings it to the Supreme Court and says, you realize that they've been using this law for the past 30 years? And then finally it gets overturned. You have to defend the Constitution because the Constitution will not defend it itself. So when I started studying the dark side of American history, I actually felt more patriotic because of the struggle for the ideal versus the people who were trying to undermine it. And conversely, I've never felt less patriotic than I am right now because of what's been happening for the last year and a half. Well, for the last 2 years, I'll say.
I remember you were running, last time we spoke, you were running for state senator. You saw what was happening, and you wanted to make a difference with that. Did you, what happened there? We were all supporting you, we all had your back, and then I think you dropped out, is that right?
Well, what had happened, the reason that I got in the first place was because for the last few election cycles, there had been no Democratic opposition, no Democratic candidate. There had only been the Republican. There'd be like a Republican primary of the Republicans fighting over each other as to be which Republican was going to run unopposed.
Right.
Election after election after election, because we live in Texas. So this is an extremely red state. And my district, Senate District 2, is also very rural. There's a number of other aspects about it that made it a particular challenge for me. And I know people have a tendency to judge people over what they look like, and I know what I look like, and I realize that being an outspoken atheist activist was certainly going to rule against me as well. But the way I saw it was that if there was, as it has in past elections, and there's the downvote, which they recently overruled. They don't have that anymore, but it used to be that you could just walk in and put one check mark, which most people do. They would check Republican. So the Republican candidate in every race would get your vote, and all you had to do was one check mark. You're voting R. Well, there's no way to vote D. I mean, you could have years ago, but there's not now. And so if you don't have a Democratic opponent, how do you do the D downvote? You can vote D, and then, the presidential candidate gets your vote. But if there's nobody in the lower rungs, and these are important. People do not understand. You think that if you elect the president just has dictatorial rule over everything. Well, we've just seen that Donald Trump wanted to make a deal with our enemies so that he could turn over American citizens to a foreign enemy, to have American citizens extradited to Russia to be interrogated or killed.
Wow.
And he thought that was an incredible idea.
Now, hold on. I thought he was just letting some Russian officials sit in and listen to Mueller's inquiries.
No, the deal was
dealing with the Russian agents. It was worse than that.
It was not said this way. But what would happen is if Putin said, okay, these are the people on my list, and Putin did name a couple of people that we know that Putin actually wants dead. So Putin named a couple of people that he wants dead to be interrogated or to be interviewed. So we would then, without any evidence of wrongdoing or any of that, if he said we want to extradite this person so that our new and improved version of the KGB will. I know that there's no KGB, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So American citizens could, on the word of a dictator, be sent to a foreign country to be dealt with by that foreign country. So if Putin wants you dead, and look what happens whenever Putin, if Putin has an election, runs against you, you end up dead. Mm-hmm. If you end up on a list of people that he wants dead, you end up dead no matter what country you're in. But now he wants the United States to turn over people per his request. And Trump said that was an incredible idea. Yeah. Fortunately, we saw that Congress is a little smarter than the idiot that they put in charge. So the entirety of Congress, unanimous vote. How often does that happen? It's rare. Ironically, it happened in the early 1800s. The entire Congress voted unanimously that the United States is not a Christian country, believe it or not. But now, of course, we're very much in a different type of Congress now. But at least they voted again unanimously that this was not an incredible idea and that the United States would not be sending its citizens to be interrogated and potentially killed by foreign dictators just because the foreign dictator mastered our sovereign leader.
Yeah, that was amazing watching him stand there in Helsinki and side with Vladimir Putin over United States intelligence.
Yeah, and so he backtracks, right? And that he tries to pretend that he does support the American intelligence, but then even in the backtrack, he still contradicts himself because he says, he believes that it was Russia. It could have been a lot of other people too. There's a lot of other people out there. And this is what he said in previous interviews. Sure, Russia might be responsible for some of it. China might be responsible for some of it. Some fat guy in his mom's basement might be responsible. So he's not accepting the American intelligence reports that it is Russia and not some fat guy in his mom's basement. So Trump will not ever say anything negative against Putin.
You think they really got something on him, or do you think that this
The only time I've ever seen him speak ill of Russia was when he was criticizing our allies for
Germany,
for making deals with Russia as if, we're in a monogamous relationship with Russia, and so other countries don't get... The hell's wrong with this guy?
He got jealous.
Exactly. I can't fathom him. Of course, his followers are far worse than he is. I mean, he is just, he's a known fraud because he lost the court case over fraud for his Trump University, and he had to pay back, over tens of millions of dollars to the people he bilked. He still made a profit on that, by the way. So even though the court ruled against him that he was a fraud. So, He's failed at every business he's ever done. He doesn't have anywhere near as much money as he says he has. His tower is not as tall as he says it is. It's off by 10 stories. He lies continuously. He's not 6'3", and he damn sure, well, he may not be 6'3", because he had on a previous driver's license report, he had that he was 6'2". So he just adds stories to his buildings and adds inches to his height, which is why he suddenly starts talking about how big his hands are, as if we're going to believe that story too, right? I mean, so the guy is just a fraud. He lies about everything to everybody. He's on record as telling more lies than any politician in history, which is impressive.
And he's only halfway in, and he's already got him beat. It's insane.
How
does this happen?
More than 3,000 false statements on record as we speak.
How does the whole Republican Party almost change? And I get what you're saying about 100% congressional vote to, not send our citizens over to Russia, and that's very inspiring. That's very encouraging.
What would happen? I would like to think that what would happen to any senator that voted to allow Americans to be extradited to foreign dictatorships? You know, just imagine. You think you're going to make it to past the 2018 midterms?
I don't think a lot. That was my question to you though. Is this weird allegiance to Trump? If you come out as a Republican, unless you're one of the very, very few that can get away with it in their state, but if you come out and say, I'm running as Republican, but I'm against Trump, some whack job, some pedophile, some neo-Nazi, some kind of crazy racist person, all they have to do is run against you and say, well, I'm pro-Trump, and that guy gets the vote. And I don't understand what's happening in our country. It's this weird populist thing, and it's terrifying me.
Okay, so there was a poll that was released, I think, yesterday that said that a majority of Republicans polled said that they would still support Trump even if it was proven that he colluded with Russia.
Wow.
So the whole thing about America first is a lie. It's Russia first. It's Trump first, and America and anybody else last. So Trump is only in this for himself. So he makes a law allowing the mentally deranged to buy guns, and then says that the problem isn't the guns, it's the mentally deranged. Well, what about the mentally deranged guy who allowed the mentally deranged to buy guns? And then he made it, the whole issue with Standing Rock, for example. I mean, Obama had finally done the right thing after that monumental display of protest, constitutional rights and protest. Obama shut that down, and so the Army Corps of Engineers produces the report saying that we knew that this was dangerous, and this is likely to leak oil into public aquifers for people who don't have alternatives and would have to go buy bottled water to live if this developed a problem. And Obama did the right thing. Hillary, of course, would have followed suit on that. She wouldn't have overturned Obama's.
Obama did the right thing extremely late in the game. We could
extremely
admit that.
late in the game. That is true.
Okay.
That is true. But he eventually did the right thing because Obama was invested in that pipeline just like Hillary was and just like Trump was. But Obama laid down a precedent we know Hillary would have backed. And Hillary said before that she will change her position on public demand. She was not personally for gay marriage, for example, but she knew that her constituency wanted gay marriage. So she has a public persona and a private persona. Her private persona did not trump what the public wanted. So she's going to do what the public wanted, even if she personally disagreed with it. And a lot of people consider that a fault. That is not a fault.
No, that's the job. You're a public official.
You are supposed
right.
to represent the public. And if your public stands against you and you vote the way they want you to, or if you rule the way that they want you to, that's an admirable trait. Okay, but then we had other people like, and we know where this is going to go. When we talk about the superdelegates within the Democratic Party, there were a number of places where Bernie won the popular vote and for the different districts that the superdelegates preside over. And on multiple occasions, these superdelegates said they didn't care who their constituency wanted. They were going to vote for Hillary anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly where things started going wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, you had people saying, well, that no matter what, that Bernie wouldn't have won, that he didn't have the votes that Hillary did. these people are forgetting, one, the places where he did win, and the superdelegates refused to put in their nomination, despite the fact that the majority of their constituency demanded Bernie. They're going to vote for Hillary anyway. And then there were places like California and a couple of others where if you were registered as a Democrat, then you can vote in the Democratic primary. But if you're registered as anything else, you can't. So there was no way for the independents of any stripe. And remember that there are more independent voters now than there are Republicans and Democrats combined. So in California, for example, they only heard from Democrats. And then they limited even those. So you remember you had how they had suddenly restricted the number of voting places and the number of people that were counting the votes. So you ended up with only a few shops, and they would have lines over a mile long. And then they would do the temporary ballots or replacement. I can't remember what the name was for it, where they run out of regular ballots. So they would do this like subsequent ballot, which was never counted, by the way. And then they later released that it was never counted. So yeah, all of that was screwed up.
I get a lot of feedback from our fellow liberals, our fellow leaders in the secular movement, doing something that seems like a horrible strategy to me, and I kind of want to pick your brain about it. It's voter shaming. It's this idea that if you voted for the Green Party, or you voted for a Libertarian Party, or you didn't get your vote to Hillary, that therefore meant it went to Trump. And I understand the logic behind it. You know, it's not crazy talk to say, hey, there were really only two realistic candidates.
Well, mathematically, yes. If you voted for Green Party or Libertarians, whatever, in most places, not in everywhere. Again, in some places it wouldn't have mattered because things were so heavily weighted one way or the other that it wouldn't have made a lot of difference. Like our state, for example. Yeah. Yeah, let's say Wisconsin or Michigan or something like that. I get the logic there, but the concept of voter shaming, to me, the idea of saying you didn't go with the party line, I have a hard time with it, because I'm looking at everything that we just talked about the DNC corruption, and all of this comes out with the WikiLeaks. We hate the word emails because it's so annoying. It's like the word Benghazi, but that was a real thing, though. And even though we kind of roll our eyes like, oh my God, you guys were totally, the right was totally hyperbolic about the 33,000 emails or whatever. Trump even brought it up whenever he was asked in the conversation we were just having about him and Putin in Helsinki. He even brings up Hillary's emails, and we're sick of it. However, it did show that they were trying to manipulate the media against Bernie, and that the media was working with the DNC, and the DNC was pulling a lot of sneaky crap. And I think that's where we should look at the responsibility, not necessarily at the voters that said, I just can't hold my nose and go with the party line. This is the thing that got me. Bernie Sanders knew that what a lot of Hillary supporters still did not know. And, there's some Hillary supporters who still don't understand this. It is public knowledge now. This has all been confirmed. This is all history now, that the DNC colluded with Hillary to suppress Bernie. So they wouldn't be able to fill the stadiums like he did. They would have like much smaller venues, but they would advertise the hell out of her venues, and they would have newspapers all the place, talking about everywhere that she had a win, where you wouldn't get much publicity for wherever Bernie got that, because the press was not going to allow his momentum. They weren't going to reflect that. So they tried to suppress that as much as they possibly could. That was an entirely grassroots movement. And a lot of people never understood that the Democratic Party really was striving to make her the candidate from the very beginning, from the onset, because the Democratic Party was bankrupt and Hillary bailed them out. And it should have been that Bernie should have run as an independent, because that would have been the first time that an independent actually had a shot. But, I understand why Bernie didn't run as an independent, why he ran as a Democrat. But he knew that he had been informed, and we found out later that he had been informed of this beforehand, that somebody working for the DNC contacted him to apologize, to say that they had actually confirmed that there was collusion to suppress him and to promote Hillary, no matter what he did, no matter what numbers he turned in, what momentum he had. And yet, he still campaigned for Hillary, urging his followers that they had to elect Hillary, corrupt though she inarguably is. Because the lesser of two evils thing, we are talking about Trump being the most corrupt and incompetent goon the United States has ever elected. This guy can't do anything right. He's never done it. He's never done a single thing for this country that anybody can point to and said, well, he did that, and that was a good thing to do. The best thing they've got is the TPP. But even when he blocked the TPP, he didn't realize it, but the way he did it gave favor to China.
Oh, really?
So somehow or other, everything Trump's done has been to make China great, right? He colludes with Russia, but it's to the advantage of China. So China has been in a huge advantage ever since they started because they invested in green technology. So they're now ramping up their sustainables, their solar power, their wind power, their tidal generators, and so forth. They have a multi-billion-dollar industry that has actually massed a huge amount of jobs, China, on green sustainable energy, which Trump won't even look at because he's beholden to the fossil fuel industry, which will kill us all. So now he wants to reopen coal mines, which will never have a future again.
Well, it's clean coal, so it's okay because you put the word clean in front of it. It's like No Child Left Behind. It sounds good, so we're like, oh, okay, yeah.
There is no way that the math can work out in his favor on this. There just isn't. He's chasing something that he knows will not succeed. He's a man in his late 70s, and he's just trying to win the game by being as rich as he pretends to be, because he's not. He lies about everything, and he has had no compassion, no compunction, no human sensibilities. He cheated on his wife when as soon as she had a baby. I mean, he cheated on all of his wives. He cheats on everybody. He cheats on his taxes, of course, which we can't ever see the tax returns because of all the hidden information he doesn't want us to find out about his prior dealings with Russia, which he's denied at least 50 times publicly.
That his sons admitted to. We have all these dealings in Russia. Both of his sons have said that, and it's just mind-blowing.
No, but this is the same guy who, during the campaign, said at one point, like it was like in September or whatever, he says that he has never been to Russia and he never met Putin. No, he said this is in October, but in September, he said that he met Putin on his last trip to Moscow while they were on a show together. So then he turns around later and says he's never been to Russia and he's never met Putin. Well, how the hell can you say that now when you said that then? Because he said late in his campaign that the only time he'd ever met a Russian was when he ripped one off in selling a bunch of real estate in Florida for way more than it was valued. Yes. That was his brag, that's the only dealing he'd ever had with a Russian. And now we know that he had already signed, a contract to build the world's tallest the tallest building in Russia was under his and how many of his contests and such, we know he has extensive business dealings in Russia. And his kids, as you said, admitted on the golf course that they get a lot of their money from Russia, when he's saying they had no dealings with them at all, ever. The man lies about everything. He doesn't know you're even not supposed to tell the truth. But you talk about this weird support that all Republicans have for him. I've met Trump supporters who will not admit that he ever lied about anything, even on the examples like what I just showed, where this can't possibly be true. And even when he admits to lying, like when he admitted that he lied to Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. He admitted that he just made up a number out of his ass to throw a contrary statistic at Trudeau so that he could have an argument. And he admitted that, as if nobody watches television. Dude, you're not in a back room with a friend. You're not alone. You're not in confidence. You're on TV. Yeah. The things you say today, other people are going to hear tomorrow. And when you tell a contrary story next week, people are going to go back and look at the tape, and they're going to compare it. So a number of comedians have done this on their late night talk shows, where they would show 50, 60 clips of Trump contradicting himself, where he's never been to Russia, where he spends a lot of time in Russia. He has no relationship with Putin, has a great relationship with Putin, and so forth. Just constantly contradicting himself during the course of the campaign. That he's pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-gay, I think it was pro-gay marriage, anti-gay marriage, and so forth. And so he's just constantly flipping on all his positions. That gay marriage is established law, and maybe we can challenge it. Yeah.
Or he's okay with abortion, but then the women need to be punished.
Yeah, and you never get an admission. You never get an admission that he's a liar. The best you will get is, well, Hillary lied too, or alternately, I will get, well, he's being honorable now. The fuck he is.
Or I heard he accepted Christ into his heart. I heard that one recently. I'm like, oh, fuck off. Let me get the brass tacks on something. What do you think is going to happen this November with the upper lower house? What do you think is going to happen in 2020? And what do you think is going to happen with this whole Mueller investigation?
Okay, well, let me start with the first one, which actually goes back to the question you asked in the beginning, which I still never answered, and I just realized that. I jumped into the state Senate race because there was no Democratic opposition. But I didn't stay in because what I found out was, while it had been in past election cycles, there would be no Democratic candidate. There was suddenly, when I threw my name in the hat, 4 other guys jumped in there too. So suddenly we have 5 Democratic candidates all at once.
Wow.
Yeah, and what I was getting from Democratic agencies and all of these organizations was that they had, once Trump was elected and people realized, oh, if you don't vote, this is what happens, there was a whole bunch of people woke up. Because the worst thing that we ever had going on in this country was all those people that whine that don't vote, it's a broken system, protest by abstaining, your vote doesn't count, all that. That's how we got here. So everybody that says that, you're the reason where we are. So I will not tolerate anybody telling me your vote doesn't count, all that. No.
Yeah, your vote matters.
It does. Even the places where I mentioned before, where it wouldn't have made much difference if you voted for the independent party versus voting for Hillary, because there was no chance Hillary was going to win in such a Republican-dominated state. We understand the extremes on that, but in general, your vote does count, and we were still striving to make this state turn blue at that time. And had it been Bernie, I agree with you completely, had Bernie gotten the nomination, it would have been.
So it sounds kind of like you did something similar to like what Bernie did, where you said, look, these other candidates have a much better opportunity. I want to throw my support their way rather than pushing against them, kind of like Bernie did with Hillary once she got the DNC vote.
Well, I knew I was impossible. The only thing that was going to get me a chance at all.
I would have loved to see you there, though, man. But I understand.
If you had a majority of people in my very rural district who decided that they weren't going to vote Republican, they were going to do the down ballot on the other party, that's the only way I was going to get any votes. But then they eliminated the down ballot conveniently at the same time, so that it didn't matter, even that. But as I said, there was one candidate that was just like a golden boy, and he definitely had the support of the Democratic Party. So he's actually got a shot at it. And he and I have talked a number of times. We are completely on the same page as far as a number of policies. I think all of them. There's not one thing he's said so far that I disagree with as far as policies goes, and he's very secular.
That's great.
So he's got our back on that. He actually spoke at we had a free thought conference at the Texas State Democratic Convention, and he spoke there. This was where a number of candidates.
Oh, great!
And let me tell you about the Texas Free Thought Convention in the Texas Free Thought Caucus in the Texas State Democratic Convention. The room. I thought there was going to be like 8 or 10 people. That's how many there were when I showed up an hour early. But that room filled to where there were hundreds of people, standing room only. And we had a bunch of candidates in there, some of whom were admitting to being atheists. And even those that didn't admit to being atheists advocated support for atheism as a minority group that needed a voice. So they were actually speaking to atheists that I will represent my atheist constituents. And when have we ever had that in Texas?
That is awesome.
So this was the channel. So I realized this guy's got a shot, and he's a lovable guy, unlike my hideous self. So this. So
he doesn't look like an angry Viking.
More so than anything else, he not only would he be good at the job, and he clearly is. But he's really passionate about it, as I would be also, but he also knows how to do it, and he actually wants the job. And more so than any candidate I can remember. I mean, there's a handful of candidates in other states that have made historic wins, and I could see why they did, and I could predict that they would, because, wow, this person's really got the energy. And this guy is one of them. He's in a district that is very much against him. His name is Kendall Scudder. Just give you a clue who I'm talking about, in Texas Senate District 2. And he's got a whole lot of energy. He's very pro-secular, and he believes in all the same things that I do with regard to political policies and where our priorities ought to be. Well, I knew there was no point in me even trying to fight this guy. Even if I could win the primary against him and get the shot, he would still be a better candidate than me. And that's the thing that matters. He would do a better job than I could, and he certainly has a better shot at getting it than I would. So I just had to bow to him. I mean, just out of being sensible.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you willing to serve, and I think you made the right decision there.
That and the way the Republican Party has been funded in our district, this is another thing that people ought to know. It had been in previous election cycles that for this very rural district, they would tell me that you're going to need about $30,000 to run your campaign to start with. You're going to have $30,000, which contrasts with the British system, because in England you have a limit of £30,000 that you can spend on your campaign, and you're not allowed to spend more than that. But we have a politics that is based entirely on money. You have to start at $30,000 and go up from there. But then very quick into this campaign, because everything changed once Trump got elected and people realized what happens when you don't vote. Suddenly there were more volunteers. Suddenly there were massive donations to the Democratic Party. But then to counter that, of course, you have the huge reserves that the Republican activists like the Koch brothers have. And as they coughed it up, like the Republican candidate against Kendall Scudder, he got a check for $750,000. That was one donation. Wow. Think about that. In a district that normally you could win for $30,000. Now you have just one donation is $750,000.
Jesus.
So yeah, so you get $1 million, let's say, estimate. I don't know what it is, but if there's one donation that's $750, how many more are there?
Yeah, that's not even counting the little ones.
Yeah, that's not even. So if we count the little ones, so let's just conservatively estimate this guy's got $1 million for a campaign in a district that usually was not important. And if it had been like it was in past election cycles where it was just me running, probably still wouldn't be that big a deal. But now we've got somebody that can actually win and will do a better job, and everybody can see that. So the Republicans have had to cough a huge amount of money to maintain this very red district.
What do you think is gonna go down this November? You think we have a shot at least the lower house?
I want to be optimistic. I really do. But people have been constantly disappointing me. How they can continue to, how they can say that they're still going to support Trump even if he colluded with the Russians to make Russia first, right? When he has already cost us jobs, when his tax cuts already are showing a reduction in our wages, and mathematically everybody knows this is going to screw us over. The people who voted for that still think you're going to make more money out of this? How? You were never going to make more money out of this. You're expendable fodder. And nobody understands. Nobody pays attention to what is actually being broadcast from the Republicans themselves when they explain how this plan works. Do you not get this? I don't follow. So I'm very disappointed in people. I've been to a number of elections previously where the right candidate, better candidate, didn't win because of low voter turnout. Because of those whiners, those hipsters that say their vote didn't count. Well, your vote would have counted, and your lack of vote definitely counted to put us all in a deeper hole. So y'all better come out in force, because, and this is statistically accurate, that when just as the Republican Party, the conservatives always benefit when there is low voter turnout, Democrats, or more specifically, progressives, benefit when there is a high voter turnout. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because it's just as I said with the way people identify with being atheists, for example. There's a quarter of the country that would check the box for no religion. Religion isn't important. I don't have a religion so far, but they wouldn't call themselves atheists, right? So these are the people that hold the values, but then do they vote on them? Yeah. That's what matters. I wish that people could understand, and I understand that there's problems with the DNC, right? And there's still a problem with the DNC because the Democrats have not figured out the establishment corporatists are a thing of the past.
Right.
They're like the coal mines. That's not coming back. The Democratic corporatist establishment has to figure out that it is the progressives now that must take over. And if they ever want to win a major election, if they want to win the presidency again, they had better run a progressive and not another Hillary.
I agree with you 100%. I worry because this coming election, Aron, I'm going to crawl through broken glass to put a check next to somebody with a D next to their name. Just because I'm saying, man, this is nuts. We're actually, our attorney general's reading the Bible while we're caging immigrant children. Like, this is insane what's going on right now. However,
yeah, and I have to tell people that Gary Johnson and what was the Green Party Stein, if you listen to them talk, they don't know what they're talking about. They are not in a position to do anything. Right. You don't. It's not like you had a Bernie out there somewhere. You know, the Green Party is still going to run Stein again. Right? Because she's just going to continue to be their candidate. If the Green Party would cough up somebody that could actually do the job better than the other candidates could, then maybe I could see voting for the Green Party. But otherwise, the only thing you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot, because the way our system works is not the way the British system works. If you don't want the Republican, you have to vote for the Democrat. That is the only way that works.
But Aron, as much as I'm voting Democrat right now, don't you feel like we're just getting played? Because all they got to do is say, we're not going to become more progressive. All we're going to do is just say, I hate Trump a lot, so vote for me.
Okay,
and
this
if
is
we
again
keep
where
doing this, we're just getting bounced back and forth. It's just this pendulum swinging, and I don't feel like we're making any real
This is why
progress.
The midterms, the 2018 midterms coming this November, are more important than the 2020 election. Because when Obama was president, and he had much more favorable figures on his side, but he still couldn't get anything done because the Republicans were determined to shoot down and defy absolutely every bill that black man wanted to promote because he was black. So that's it. We're just not going to let him do anything. And so Trump now, as I brought up before, comes up with these outrageous ideas that even his own Congress unanimously votes against. So it doesn't matter that it's not like you get the president, it's not a king. He's not a king who can say whatever he wants and we all have to be complicit with that. That doesn't happen. The thing that matters is when I became an activist, the reason that I became an activist 20 years ago was because I was talking to a number of evangelicals who were bragging how their congregations had positioned certain senators and judges and so forth because they were voting exactly the way their ministers told them to vote as a block in order to position these people as part of what they called the culture war, where this is what was revealed accidentally by the Discovery Institute when they released what was they called the wedge strategy, where they wanted to replace judges and city council members and all the low-lying positions with evangelical believers. So that eventually, when you get a conference like something going into the Supreme Court perhaps, that you have all the judges and everything was already going to favor the evangelical position. And this almost worked because you had a Bush-appointed conservative Christian judge sitting on Kitzmiller versus Dover. The thing that nobody expected was that the judge was still going to be a good judge and rule impartially, which he did, which is why we won Kitzmiller versus Dover. But otherwise, and it was spelled out in the wedge strategy that was how that was supposed to go down. You get the conservative Christian judge, and then you get the things to the Supreme Court, or you get, this was just district court, but you get up to that level, and then you win. That wasn't going to happen, but that was the plan. So what you have to do is the low-level educations, the midterms matter. And this time, this election cycle, the midterms matter more than 2020, because if we don't turn out for the 2018, if we don't overturn as many things as possible in 2018, it won't matter what we do in 2020.
And everybody's waiting for this Mueller investigation, but I think that they're forgetting if you don't have the majority, you don't have the opportunity for impeachment. So I agree with you 110%. This November is going to be so important.
But here's another thing. It doesn't matter if you impeach the president now, because then we get Pence. Okay, so unless we can implicate Pence too, which I think they have. So what we're looking for is to change the House leadership so that we need to get a Democratic majority in 2018 at which time we can then impeach Trump and Pence and would replace them with somebody that would be infinitely more reasonable, because, I mean, who isn't infinitely more reasonable than those two?
What do you think's going to happen in 2020?
I don't have a lot of hope, and this will all be determined by 2018. If y'all don't turn out and vote en masse and make some big damn differences in 2018, there won't be a 2020.
I hope that the people listening get that message, because I agree with you 110%. If anybody want to learn more about you, if they don't already know who you are and been living under a rock forever, how can they find you one more time?
Well, you can look up my videos, of course, on Aron Ra. I run a YouTube channel, has about 180,000 subscribers right now. Please, if you like what I do, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/ARONRA. That's one again. That's patreon.com/ARONRA.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Aron Ra, Thomas Baer, and David Blair. Find Dave's music at davefreesong.com/free music. Support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, we'll be bringing back two conspiracy theorists that have been on the show before. Sean Yankee is a 9/11 truther, and Tyler Klatenoff. Many of you will remember him. That episode was crazy. I'm just going to say it. Tyler is a flat earther. Well, I thought it might be fun to add one more person to that conversation. Nuclear physicist Dr. Ben Davis. If that name rings a bell, it's because last time he was on the show, he was explaining quantum physics to us. It's no doubt gonna get crazy. That's next week. Until then, you have the right to reason.
And I want to thank you for talking to me about politics, because I get so many Trump supporters and so many libertarians and so forth. So I don't agree with you about politics, but they don't say why they don't agree. And I think the reason that they don't is because
that there's like
they can't defend a position. I don't want any laws to apply to me. That's how I know they're libertarians.
It's like, yeah, but it's so weird that within our secular movement, there's been so many of these real conservative leaning folks. And I guess we didn't expect that, 10 years ago or something, that this is where we would be, where it's just as politically divided as it was before. It's just that these politically divided people are calling themselves atheists now. And I don't understand that. I really don't. I would have thought it would have gone more humanist, which I assumed would go more toward a liberal agenda, but shows what I know.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I keep being disappointed by humanity.
Oh, hey, nice job on the stripper pole, by the way. You gotta tell her to quit posting all this shit. But no, it's funny.
All right.
Anyway, I'm gonna get out of your hair, man.
I'll do that in a second.
That's just the way it is. Things will never be the same. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah. Something will never change.